All right, so like Brian said, my name's Dallin Farnes. I work here at STG with Brian, and we're going to talk about Mongo tonight. Has anybody used Mongo? Okay, so a few of you guys. Okay. I got into Mongo about 3 years ago, and to be honest, I actually kind of avoided it at first. I got a really bad taste for NoSQL databases with another NoSQL database. It'll remain nameless. And I just didn't have any interest in Mongo. I did actually go to a training once on Mongo at a conference, and I was kind of like, yeah, let's go see what this is all about. And they kept using words that I was familiar with, that I was like, oh, no. I've been down this route before. I don't want to do that again. Well, then, about a year after that, I just kept hearing about Mongo. And I was like, okay, I'm going to put some effort into this. I'm going to see what all the hype is about and just see if it's something that I'm really interested in. And so I found that Mongo has a great resource. It's MongoDB University. They have some great classes out there. It's all free. And that is the fountain of all of my knowledge in relation to Mongo. They have classes that you can take. They have graded coursework and stuff. It's not just videos that you watch. It's great. I really enjoyed it. I've done several courses out there, and I would recommend it to anybody who actually wants a good deep dive into a variety of Mongo topics, whether you're a developer, or a DBA, or whatever. And so that's how I got started in Mongo. I went out there and I did that, and then ever since then I've been hooked. So let's talk about what is Mongo, right? I'm assuming all of you know that it's a database. If not, well, it's a database, okay? So, what is Mongo? Mongo, this is straight from the Mongo website. Mongo is a general-purpose, document-based, distributed database built for modern application developers and for the cloud era. And no database makes you more productive. I like that little jab, because in my mind, Mongo has actually made me more productive on the projects that I've been able to use it on. About a year ago, I went to a Mongo event. It was a Mongo user group. And somebody there used the phrase that I was like, oh, I like the way they said that. They referred to Mongo as a multi-schema database, okay? So I always thought of as Mongo as being just schemaless. You can just jam whatever data you want into this database and just run with it. And while you could technically do that, every time I've worked on a Mongo system, I've organized my data. I've built a data schema, and then I use that while I'm working in my application. But it's multi-schema, meaning that you can have a variety of schemas or maybe different versions, okay? So let me show you guys an example. Excuse me. So here's a JSON object. First name, last name, occupation. And you know, it's very basic. You could actually represent that in a SQL database with just different columns, right? But then, you know, let's say you insert a whole bunch of records into your database. You know, a whole bunch of Jedi Knights. Well, then your team lead comes along and says, hey, we gotta make a change. We gotta add a column or another data point to track. And so then you have to have a status. Sorry if there's any spoilers for those of you who haven't actually watched Star Wars several years ago. Both of these are valid schemas that could exist in the same database at the exact same time. And that right there is probably the biggest selling point for Mongo when it comes to whether or not I should use Mongo. I don't like database migrations. When somebody on a team adds a column, removes a column from the database, and then you have migrations to run, you have to make sure that your database version matches your application version, or you could have some just weird impedance mismatch. Okay? So both of these records could exist in the database at the exact same time. And Mongo wouldn't throw a fit. Does that make sense? You guys have any questions about that? So multiple schemas all at the same time. Okay? All right, let's talk then about some concepts with data. With Mongo. Data in Mongo is organized into collections. Collection would be analogous to a table. It's basically just a grouping of data. A lot of people think of Mongo as actually being a JSON database, but it's not. When the team at Mongo first decided they needed to, build this database, they looked at JSON, and then they said, no, this isn't going to work. JSON has very basic data types. You got your numbers, you got your strings, and you have some booleans. But for the most part, that's it. And that's not the sort of rich data typing that a database needs. And so they came up with the spec called Beastson. It's a binary JSON. And if you actually look at the database using the different tools and we'll get to that. I'll show you guys some of the tooling for Mongo. If you actually look at a database and when it spits the data out at you, it looks like a JSON object, but nobody wants to actually look at Beastson. And I'll show you guys an example of what Beastson looks like. This is an example of what a JSON would look like if you just put a string in there for like a date, which is a rich data type. But this right here, this is what Mongo does. It defines this type, ISO date, and then it uses Beastson to save that date. And this way, when you can write queries that are date specific, as an example, right? Whereas if you just tried to write a string that said, give me all the dates in a specific order, depending on the formatting of your date strings, you might get some weird orderings, right? But because you have a strong data type for a date in this example, you get a little more functionality. So let me show you guys what Beastson looks like. And this is why nobody actually wants to read it. It's clear down there in the corner. This is a JSON object that just says hello world. I ripped it off from Wikipedia because I didn't want to type Beastson. Because of the formatting of Beastson, it actually makes it really convenient for Mongo in the back end to go in and update single properties in the data instead of having to rewrite the whole object. I worked with another NoSQL database where when we wanted to write a new object to the database, we had to grab the whole object, make the change, and write that whole object back into the database. That's not the case, and in my opinion, it's because of Beastson. Because of the way that it actually cuts up the data into chunks, we can just say, okay, go to this location in the binary object and just modify that attribute in what would be a JSON object. Okay. Do you guys have any questions about Beastson? It's actually nothing you really ever have to worry about generally. It's kind of a nice to know about Mongo, but I'll handle the background.
Sorry, did you say that that's JSON that you're, or that's the Beastson?
So this image at the bottom is Beastson. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about another concept, and that is denormalizing your data. So with Mongo, one of the biggest mindsets you have to get out of when you're designing your database, and your database schema rather, is you have to denormalize your data. So if you actually look at this JSON object, in a SQL database, you would likely have your username, or your user as one object, and then you would have another table, probably in a many-to-many relationship, that would actually represent the different roles that that user has. With Mongo, you denormalize your data and you bring that data back into the object. The reason being is that SQL has really good join functionality. In Mongo, it's not as necessary, and they have a little bit of join functionality, but it's not as verbose as what they have in SQL. The way I like to think of this is that, let's say you go to a file cabinet. You open up your file cabinet and you pull out a folder. And in that folder, you have all of the information about the customer. Okay? Generally, you're not going to have to go to another file cabinet and pull out another folder that has the products that that customer has bought. All of that information would likely be in that single file or folder for that customer. And so it's kind of the same idea here. You have a user, and then you have the user roles that that user has. It makes it easier so that when you do a query, all of the data is already right there. And you can write a query that would just pull the roles, just pulls the username. But if you separate this out and put roles in a completely different collection, then your query is going to get either more complicated, or you're going to have to do it with multiple queries. Yes.
Let's take an example like your products. You put like the price, the description, all the metadata about the product.
Sure.
Where would you store all the reviews of the product? Would you put them all review into the main document, or would you have a separate collection just for reviews? That could be really big.
It could be. Potentially, it could be very big.
Yeah.
So I would put it all in that same collection. I would have the product data, and then I would have an array that represented all of the reviews. What you would have to be careful of is that when you write your queries, you don't say, give me the product, and then just stop there, because that wouldn't scale well. What you would do is then you would just say, give me the product name, and then Mongo would hand back just the name, or give me 5 reviews, the top 5 or whatever. You got to make sure you write your queries such that you don't pull back the whole record every single time. But it's still an option too. Let's say that performance isn't an issue and you really want to see that whole product object. Now it's really easy to just grab that whole thing. Another hand. I saw another hand.
Yeah, so if the data is all like normalized, does that mean in general Mongo database is going to be larger than a relational database because you've got things duplicated throughout the whole system?
Generally, I would say yes. Yeah. And that's not to say that you couldn't do joins, right? That you couldn't have a normalized database, but it's just not as efficient with Mongo. But yeah, I would say that you're going to have some duplicated data just because of that. But it really, again, it actually depends on the data you're storing too. Any more questions? Okay. It's a really hard mindset to get out of because, every database class I ever took with SQL, they were like, normalize your data. And then I get to Mongo and they're like, nope, denormalize your data. And there's a whole course you could do on just schema design. And I've done it in 2 slides. So this is a very deep topic with Mongo. Okay, so let's talk about how to run Mongo. There is the option to self-host it if you want. If you do that, you just go out to Mongo, you download whichever package you want. They have an enterprise one you can pay for. I'm not sure what the pricing is for that. You can download the community edition, which is free. And and that works great. I run the community edition on my local box for development. I've also set it up on production servers before. Excuse me. Mongo actually recommends in a production environment having 3 instances of your database. One that runs as a primary and 2 secondaries. And you configure them such that if the primary goes down, one of the secondaries will step up and become the new primary until the primary comes back on, and then it would rejoin as a secondary. And that's not too hard to set up, but it definitely takes effort. Okay? And if you're going to self-host Mongo and you want to run in that recommended setup, then you're going to have to do that all yourself. Mongo has another option. It's called Atlas, and it is their cloud offering. And I think it's fantastic. I have even actually used it for development instead of setting up a local instance as well. They have a free tier, which gives you a small database with it's up to 500 megabytes, which isn't a big database, but you'd be surprised how much data you can smash inside a 500 megabyte database. The nice thing about Atlas is that you get to choose the cloud platform you want it to run on. You can do AWS, Azure, or Google, and then they handle everything for you. You know, they handle the maintenance. Every time a new version of Mongo comes out, they will handle rolling up to that next version. They handle all the security. They handle backups. They handle that 3-instance setup as well. Even on the free tier, you still have a primary and 2 secondaries, and they'll fail over automatically. The security is nice too because it allows you to whitelist IP addresses really easy or blacklist them, whichever you want to do. I can't actually recommend Atlas enough because it's so awesome. It takes away all of the stuff I don't want to do.
Do you only use like MongoDB or can you run like other?
With Atlas, it's just Mongo. Yep. But they do actually have a new product called Stitch, I think is what they called it. And I've actually played around with it a little bit. It allows you to create a serverless application that would basically run as an API. And so instead of having a whole other instance that's running your API, and I think you might even be able to build forms and stuff, and like build a rudimentary UI. I'm not sure about that. Anyway, it's kind of a cool product because it allows you to just, you know, say here's your data, and then expose the data you want, and you don't just throw your data at the API. You can actually set up the different rules for, you know, which parts of the data is accessible, which parts you want people to view or not. So it's kind of a cool product, and I would recommend looking into it. But it's actually fairly new. And my understanding is that when Mongo first came out, that was the product they wanted to build. And then they realized that the database they needed to kind of power that product that they wanted to build was not really available. And so that was one of the driving forces behind them actually building Mongo and creating the product that they had. And then when they finally got to a certain point, they said, oh, this is great. Now we can build this other product, which I believe that's where Stitch came from. So, any questions? Mm-hmm?
Is there an advantage of one hosting side over the other?
My preference is, you're talking about the cloud platforms? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they went with AWS in the beginning. And in the beginning, AWS was the only spot where you actually had the free tier if you wanted to spin up just a little 500 megabyte database. But now you actually have that in all of the environments. And so I would say at this point, there is no benefit to actually one or the other. I use Azure at this point. In the beginning, it was all AWS, but now my preference, as far as cloud platforms go, is Azure. And so I always use Azure. Mm-hmm.
Is Mongo kind of equivalent to DynamoDB to take one of Amazon services?
Yeah, I've never used Dynamo, so I apologize. I have heard a lot of people compare it to Cassandra from Facebook. So but I'm not sure about that either. I personally never used Cassandra either. So.
Yeah. Nowadays,
There was another thing I was going to say about the cloud platforms. Oh, I remember. You can set it up such that it's spread across cloud platforms. So you can have some of your instances running in AWS and some of them running in Azure. And so if AWS has an outage, Azure it could fail over to Azure, which I think is actually a huge selling point to have multiple cloud platforms. Okay. Any other questions about that?
Yeah, nowadays people are moving to the cloud, right?
Okay. So let's talk about some tooling that Mongo makes available. When you install MongoDB locally, it installs a bunch of command line tools. And I'm going to show those to you in a moment, but they're pretty basic and they make sense. You can connect to the database, you can write queries, you can insert documents, you can run backups. And they've broken it out into different console applications that you want to run. Let's say if you want to do a data import or an export, they have different command line tools for that. There's also another application called Compass, and this is a GUI application. It has buttons, lists, great. You connect to your database, and then you can actually visualize the data. You can modify the data, all in a graphical interface, which is fantastic. Okay. And then Mongo publishes a bunch of drivers that you can pull into your applications and use to write queries against the Mongo database. And if we have time, I was going to show you guys a CSharp application that consumes a database. So all of these drivers are documented out at Mongo's website. They're supported by Mongo, so they're not third-party drivers. I wouldn't use a third-party driver, and so I think that's great. Any questions about those? Oh yeah, back there.
Is where we install Compass on machines or where?
Yes, Compass is an application you just install. You can go out to Mongo. I can show you guys the download spot if you want to see where to get it. In fact, if you were to install Mongo with the Mongo database locally and self-host it on your own machine, it actually gives you the option of installing Compass as well. And so I always do that because I like Compass. Okay. All right. So let me show you guys some stuff. Turn off PowerPoint. And I'm going to show you guys console tools. Okay. Oh, did we lose the screen share? Is it because let's see, hold on. Play. Okay. So, are we back up? Okay. All right. So here is the Mongo tools that get installed when you install MongoDB. The one that I want to show you guys is Mongo. It's really originally named Mongo. Okay. So what this does is it just it connected me to my local database. This is the default location for where a database gets installed. It always runs on port 27017. And you can change that if you want, but that's just the default. In fact, Mongo got kind of it was in the news about 2 years ago, I think it was, because people kept installing production servers and keeping the default configuration. And so hackers were just browsing the internet, crawling the internet, looking for Mongo databases that were exposed running on port 2717. And when they found one, they could connect to it because by default there are no credentials. This is for a development environment, and so these people could just connect and then dump all the data out of the database, leave a ransom note. It was horrible.
Weird.
Okay, so don't do that. Don't install a production box and leave the default settings. Okay, so we're connected to Mongo database locally, and what we can do is I can just type here, show DBs. These are databases that I have, and this is one that I created for a little project I'm running. This one as well. These ones are created by Mongo. So let's say you wanted to create a new database and insert a record into it. We're going to call our database. We're going to say use. Well, that's clear down there. Shoot. I can make. Let me make the. Can I zoom? Oh, look at that. Okay. And then let's put it up there at the top. Okay. So you don't have to have the database created before you want to use it. Okay. So we're just going to say use Star Wars. And we have now switched to the Star Wars database. Even though when we said show DBs, it's not there, we're still using a database called Star Wars. We can say show me collections. There's no collections. Okay? So let me grab JSON object. This is the same one we saw in the PowerPoint slide. And we can just say DB, and then we're going to, again, the collection doesn't have to be created before we use it. We're just going to say db.characters, insert, and we just build. You could type it out if you wanted. I'm not going to do that. You just, put your JSON object there, insert, and now it's there, okay? So let's say we have our document, or our document, we want to look at it. You can say db characters find. And there it is. If you want to see it pretty, some formatting, pretty. Okay. Let's insert another one. Let's do the multi-schema stuff we were talking about, right? So here is another JSON object. This is the other one that has the status of dead for Han Solo. I apologize. Characters. Insert. I'll move that up there. Okay. So let's look here, right? So the difference between this object and the last one is this one has the status of dead here, right? Oops. Okay. Inserted. All right. So now, if we do a find with pretty, we're going to see both of them here, right? And this one has a status of dead. This one doesn't. Mongo doesn't care that there are multiple schemas here. Okay. So let's say you want to do a query. Let's say you want to, instead of this right here, like that, that's the equivalent of, let's clear down there, hold on. That's the equivalent of like a select star in SQL, okay? That's just going to give you everything. The whole document, all the documents. And actually, if you had enough documents right now, it would paginate them. Because Mongo's not going to spit out 100,000 records for you. It's going to say, okay, here's 20, I think is what it is. Excuse me. Okay, so let's say you want to grab just Han Solo. So what we're going to do is we're going to build, Mongo's query language is JSON. Okay, they've introduced different properties that you can add to your JSON object to do stuff like greater than, less than, sorting, all sorts of stuff. I'm going to keep this pretty simple. Okay, so let's say you want to grab just Han Solo. We're going to build out a small JSON object that just says Han, just like that. And let's do pretty because we want some formatting. Okay. So it excluded Luke Skywalker. Right, it gave us just the one that we wanted. Now let's say you don't want to get the whole object. Coming back to your question, right? So find has another parameter here where you can say, you build out another object. Let's say you just want to see his occupation. And you say occupation, and then what it wants is a true or false flag. So we're going to put a 1 here. Okay? And now you can see we got just the occupation. And we still got the ID. You can actually hide the ID. The ID is included by, oops. Let's see. What have I done? We're getting into other stuff that I've, okay, I'll just type it again. You can hide that ID by just passing in a false parameter for it. Okay? Okay. So then let's say ID 0. And now we get back just the property we want. Okay. Mongo has a framework that they call the aggregation framework. And it allows you to build out a pipeline for, you grab a subset of data, and then in your pipeline that you've defined, all in JSON again, you say, okay, take this subset of data and sort it. And then after it's sorted, let's take all the arrays in it and flatten them. And then sort it again, okay? So you can build out this pipeline. I'm not going to show that to you guys just because it can get pretty crazy. Compass actually makes it really easy to use. Okay, so let's look at Compass, but before we jump over there, do you guys have any questions about this? Yeah.
In the terminal, is it operating an object or in that way, or like that, so that's great for the or how would you go about, let's say, adding status to loop on that?
Yeah, you could. There are, so like we just used the find and the insert. Those are the only two we've used, right? They also have an update, delete. Let's see, is it update? I think it's called, yeah, there's an update many. And then, so when you do that, you can pass in flags that say, override the object, replace the object, or just append to the object. Mm-hmm. And I would say most of the time you want to append. Mm-hmm. And then also there is a replace. So there's the update method, there's also a replace method too, instead of find and insert and stuff. Okay. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yeah. Are there any other questions about this stuff before? Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So let's say Yoda, right? We don't have a Yoda.
Well, I mean, like, first name becomes like middle name.
Oh, yeah, okay. It wouldn't work, right? Let's just leave Yoda there. It's not going to throw a fit because it can't find it. And that comes back to the idea of multiple schemas. It recognizes that you could have a variety of schema versions in that list. In fact, a good example to show you would to say, give me a status. Right? We know that if we do that, that's going to give us Han Solo, right? But it's not going to give us Luke, right? Even if we pass in something else, we're still not going to see Luke. It's only looking for at the documents that have those properties.
Is there a way to find one that doesn't have status? Like, could you say status?
Yeah.
Null, or does that not
I did that once, and I'm trying to remember. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Okay.
So, like, I've got Mongo on my system.
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of followed along up to Luke, and so I've got, Star Wars database has been created.
Mm-hmm.
Luke has been inserted. Because when we first created Star Wars, we still looked in collections and it wasn't there.
Right.
Or we looked in the database and it wasn't there,
Mm-hmm.
even though we're operating inside Star Wars.
Right.
How do we commit Star Wars?
Oh, so it did it on the fly. Like when we create.
As soon as we insert anything
Yep.
into the database.
Yep. So that's a good point. So let's show DBs again, right? So here is Star Wars now, right? And if we say show collections, now we have characters. Okay.
So there's no actual committing process. It's like, because you're working here, we're going to commit.
Yeah, yeah. And with the, I don't want to say the latest version of Mongo, but it's a pretty recent one. Excuse me. They actually now support transactions. And so, if you had an operation that needed to be rolled back because something horrible happened, you could use transactions to actually catch it, roll it back without affecting your database. And that's a topic I need to dive more into with Mongo. I've done it plenty of times with SQL, but with Mongo, it's a fairly new idea. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So let's look at the same thing. So here's Compass. If I minimize that, did we lose the screen share? Okay. All right, good. Okay. So we're going to connect. And I don't know why. Oh, it's all recent. Never mind. So we're just going to connect to our local host. You can, see here you have a whole bunch of options for connecting. And actually, what's kind of cool is if you were to copy a connection string, let's say from Atlas, and then open up Compass, Compass will recognize that you have your connection string in the clipboard, and it will paste it into all of the appropriate fields here and create a connection for you. The first time it did that, I was like, what just happened? That was so cool. All right, so we're going to connect. Okay, so you can see over here on the left, we have the databases, same as when we did show DB. Here's our databases. We can expand it. We can see that we have a characters collection in it. Right? We can do the same thing right here. If we just hit characters, and then let's click characters, we're going to see we have characters. Characters. What's kind of cool about this is you can edit these objects on the fly. So, Han Solo, let's say he's a pilot. Let's say we don't want pilot, we want captain, right? And it's not actually going to commit these changes until I hit update. Okay. What's also cool is we have the same functionality of writing our queries. We can come up here in the filter and we can say a first name, and you get a little bit of IntelliSense. Let me do that again. So, actually, I don't know if I can zoom in on this. Yeah, I can't. Let me see if there's a. Ooh. Control Shift equals. Is that helpful? Is that better? Okay. I've never had to zoom in on Compass. Okay. So let's do the IntelliSense again. So there we have IntelliSense here, right? And since status is only here once, let's say status. It's not going to pick that one up. Okay. Let's go back to first name now. First name and Han. Oh, and this is case sensitive. If we do that, it's not going to find it. We hit find over here. Nothing, right? Here's our Han. Okay. And yeah, you can
find out if I have Compass installed.
If you did it ask you when you installed Mongo, or did you install Mongo just now, or was this previously?
I installed Mongo.
Okay. If you just went down to your start menu and searched for Compass, if I can spell it, it would probably pop up. But it runs as a completely independent application. You could probably also, over here, okay. Wow, my console window is really messed up. You could probably find it in program files if you wanted to. You can also copy a document, right? So you have some copy document, clone the document, delete the document, okay? I love this because now I don't have to remember all of the different methods for the console application. You know, whether it's insert or delete. I always have a hard time remembering if I want to delete something, is it delete or remove? It's actually remove, but for some reason, sometimes I think it's delete. It's nice because I can just come here and say delete it. It's going to ask me to delete it, right? And here, let's, yeah. So now we just have the one, right? I actually want solo in there, though. We'll do it later. Never mind. Okay. Do you guys have any questions about Compass? Yes.
This is your local, right?
Yeah.
On the web.
No, this isn't out on Atlas. Okay. Yeah, this is just my local database. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It says indexes up in the corner. Is it automatically indexing stuff?
Yes and no. So if we go over here, you're going to see by default an index for IDs. It's always going to index IDs. You can create other indexes here. I actually don't really like creating an index in Compass. There was an index that I created here. I'll show you. It's over here in this notebook database that I have. And let's see. Instances. I created an index that would allow me to do wildcard text searches. And you have to have an index for that sort of operation, okay? And right here, let's see if it'll let me open it. It's not letting me open it. I found it really difficult to actually figure out how to create this index oh, that's not what I want. Anyway, I found it really difficult to create this index in Compass. And so when you create an index, you just do it with another JSON string, just like everything else in Mongo. And so I had the index built out the way I wanted, and I just went out to the console application and just said create index, pasted in my index string, and did it there. But that's a really obnoxious index. You know, if you just wanted to index a single field, let's go back over to Star Wars. Characters. And you can also, when you create an index, you can tell it to do it in the background so that it won't affect database performance. I wonder if that's an option here. Yeah, build in the background. Right. So let's say we want, and it has detected that we have these in all of our objects. Notice the status isn't there. But let's say we want an index for first name, sending, build it in the background. Okay. Oh, you need a name. First name index, and you can do multiple fields. So,
could you have built an index from status though?
I think so. I mean, I don't know why you couldn't, but it's not giving it as an option. We can try it. I've actually, now that I think about it, I don't think I've ever created an index for a property that wasn't available on all of them. Let's try it. I'm all for trying new things. Status. Yeah, it doesn't like that. I do think you'd be able to do it in the console application. Let's try. Sorry, what?
It looks like it's expecting it.
Oh yeah, right there. Let's try that. Maybe I got ahead of myself. That's why I have you guys here. Okay, so we have our status index now. Okay. You guys guys got any more questions about Compass? Yeah.
Um,
Oh.
Go ahead.
Why don't you guys arm wrestle?
yeah. As far as the ID,
Mhm.
each entry you have those object IDs. Is
Yeah.
there a way to either limit that, or if you're working with another database, to sync them up so that it's not auto-generating, so that you can join those? Or
Yeah.
how would you do that?
Well, so I like to use GUIDs for my database IDs, and so when I create, well, here, let me show you. Let's jump over to a C# app real quick. Oops. Who does C#? No, but oh, good, Brian. Thank you. Okay. So let me show you what I like to do. So here's a character, right? And what I like to do is say ID, getter and setter, and then I initialize it to a new GUID, but then I do it as a string. Okay? So if I run this application, trust me when I say that this is an awesome application. I was hoping to have time to show it to the whole thing to you guys and maybe even build it from scratch, but I don't think we have time for that tonight. So let's. I'm going to create a character called Yoda. So this is the data that was just inserted, and here is the ID. Okay. So now let's go over to Compass again. And we're going to see, oh, documents already. And let's hit find. Hold on, what have I done wrong? I think I had a different database name now that I think about it. When I typed it here, I think oh no, okay. So my C# app had a different name for the characters collection. Okay, so notice here, this is a GUID ID, right? Whereas if we go over here and look at the other one, this is an object ID. Now this object ID, this is a type. Ooh, it's not letting me select that. This is a type defined by Mongo. So if you don't provide an ID, it will provide an ID. That's kind of an underlying idea behind all Mongo documents, is that every single document has to have an ID. And so if you don't provide it, they will. Which is why I like to actually use GUIDs, because I like GUIDs more than what they've created right here. So, yeah. Any other questions?
Back to indexes.
Yeah, sure.
Is there any rule of thumb, or do you just create an index for anything that you're going to be searching on, any field you're searching on?
I mean, you could do that, but there is actually a point of diminishing returns where you could have too many indexes, right? There is a tool that allows you to profile your database queries, and it will actually tell you the path that is taken every time it runs a query, and kind of recommend the different indexes that you might want. As kind of a minimum, they recommend indexes for sorting. So if you're going to do a lot of sorting, you can actually create one index to sort one direction, another index to sort another direction. I wouldn't say you necessarily want to index everything you're going to search, but you know, it's just kind of a per basis situation, I would think. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how does MongoDB compare to a relational database in terms of efficiency?
Yeah. Well, I think it comes back to the question that this gentleman asked earlier, where, you know, could you pull a whole document? Yes, you could, right? It's all about writing smart queries and having a good schema that is actually appropriate for Mongo, right? So have a denormalized database, write good queries. I would say you're going to get just as good performance as a SQL database. You know, you can write bad queries in SQL and have a horrible experience there too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Brian?
I've heard that for some stuff it can be faster because you're denormalized. You just create that one record in your data instead of having to hop through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't have joins anymore. I mean, you can actually write a join. You use an operator called lookup. But yeah, generally speaking, because your data is denormalized, it's all right there, ready for you to grab. Mm-hmm.
And then on the flip side, there's certain things that take longer, like if you want to go change all the fields in every record. Now you're moving around a lot. So
yeah. Well, and earlier you asked, is there data duplication, right? And so sometimes because of your denormalized database, let's say you change the name of a product, and that same product name is referenced in all of these customers, you would have to go update all those customers too. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, that's a situation where SQL might be better suited. But personally, I've actually started using Mongo for all of my side projects. And the reason being is that I love the flexibility I get with multiple schemas. When I change my data schema in my application, I don't have to write a migration script. I don't have to run, I don't have to roll up, roll down different versions. I just add a new property to my data schema, and then the next time I save or update a record, it just gets inserted. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
So I like that ability too, but I use Mongoose as my driver.
Mm-hmm.
It forces me to have a schema.
Okay.
Does yours driver do that?
No, it doesn't. Yeah.
So I have to define a schema, and Mongoose won't let me do anything outside of that schema. To get Mongo reads is fine with it. So that's so frustrating.
Yeah, I imagine so. No, I just use the class like the C# driver from Microsoft, or from Mongo rather, and then when I create my C# object right here, this one has that status property that we didn't have on some of our other records, right? But the next time I create one, it's going to show up there, right? And so, I mean, I am defining a schema because I'm using this class and mapping it to a collection. But then what's kind of cool is when you actually create your connection to the Mongo database, what I've put in here is to ignore extra elements. This is a flag from Mongo where you can say, I'm going to have multiple schemas here. We're just going to ignore some of the extra stuff and just use the data we can with this particular object. So, yeah. Well, unless there's any more questions, which I'm happy to answer. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just curious if you've ever been bitten in the butt by the flexibility that Mongo gives you.
Yeah, just now with my demo, I accidentally created the characters collection again, one with lowercase c and one with uppercase c. I mean, the flexibility is the thing I love, right? And so I wouldn't say I've ever really had a bad experience with it. I've looked at other databases and decided not to use them because I didn't have that flexibility. And so having the ability to create a database on the fly, having multiple schemas, is the whole reason I do this, the whole reason I use it. So,
Why does Compass seem to be so slow? Like when you refresh, you're all locally, right?
Yeah.
Why did it take so long?
I wish I had a good answer for you. Yep.
Like
So yeah, when I hit refresh here, it just kind of, I'm not sure what it's doing. Yeah, I'm not sure what it's doing in the background, but you would think that it's going to just do that really fast.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wish I had a better answer.
You're all local, right? You're not,
yeah, I'm not connecting out to Atlas right now. Nope.
As far as using in your application, you don't see that kind of delay.
No, not at all. Yeah. Compass is doing something else, and it might just be because there's so much metadata. It's when I hit the refresh up here, this is for all of the databases, and I have 6 of them, and that's not an outrageous amount, and none of them are really big. Yeah. But it is, it's saying, how many documents do we have? What's the total size? Indexes are there, right? It might just be collecting a lot of metadata. Yeah. That's my answer, but I'm not sure if that's right. There are actually other tools out there created that kind of compete with Compass, and Compass is the one that I've seen work the best. I actually had someone come to me once and say, hey, I can't get my tool to do this, and I'm like, well, what are you using? And I can't even remember the name of which one he was using, but I was like, go get Compass. And he went and got Compass, and it just worked for him. I was like, okay.
Is it an Electron app? You know?
It might be. It kind of feels like Electron.
Looks like it.
Yeah. I don't know. Let me show you guys one last thing, because I think I mentioned this earlier. So let's go to MongoDB. Oops. If you wanted to download it, you could come to, is that where? So, yeah, community software, or community server rather. And you know, they really kind of, they're like, hey, we noticed you're about to download it. You should use Atlas instead, right? But if you wanted to download it, you get sent out here, and then they're going to kind of be like, hey, download Enterprise. That's great. No, switch over to Community, and you just choose what you want at this point. You don't have to fill out any contact information or anything obnoxious. You just download it here, right? And then if you come over to Tools, here is Compass, and again, you can choose your platform. You know, don't use Ubuntu, use Red Hat if you're a Linux person. You know, go stable, but they have different versions here as well. So if you, and then like I said earlier, if you download the server, the community edition, I don't think it says it here. It would actually give you the option of installing Compass when you install this. So, and then one more thing. Let's go over to Mongo University. So it's got university.mongo.com. These are, like I said at the very beginning, these are free courses, things you can just go take. They have, let's go to all courses. But they've kind of outlined some paths here for you, right? But this Mongo Basics one, I've not actually done it. I jumped straight into, I'm not seeing it now. There is a MongoDB for .NET developers that I've done. I also did, I've done this aggregation framework, and there's a DBA one too. I'm probably scrolling too fast to see it. Anyway, these are fantastic courses. They're free. They have really good content. They're run by people who work at Mongo. So I would recommend these for anybody who wants to use it and learn more stuff about Mongo. Okay, that's it. And I have Mongo swag up here. I've got some stickers. Everybody should power your applications on Mongo. And if any of you have a Galaxy S7, there you go.